So what we're playing today is Beyond the Map. It's a top-down isometric survival crafting action RPG with some horde elements. A lot of people have compared it to Diablo 4, which is kinda fair. There's definitely some similarities like the health and mana globes off to the sides. And combat certainly leans in that Diablo realm because AoE attacks are where it's at. But I also noticed that character models share design similarities to World of Warcraft, which makes me think that the developer has been inspired by Blizzard games in general. Which is a good thing, because remember that survival MMO that Blizzard announced a while back? It drummed up quite a bit of hype because people wanted to see what they could come up with. And unfortunately it got cancelled. But that means maybe that Beyond the Map could help fill a few gaps, right? Hopefully, fingers crossed. But before that can happen, we need to know if it's like all the other survival games out there, if it's old hat, or if it's got anything new for us to play with. So starting out we get 3 choices of characters to choose from, the Marine, Pirate, and Scholar. But selecting any one of these doesn't set you down a specific path. Think of these more like starting traits that give you an edge in your playstyle. I picked the Scholar because I really like having the ability to port to safety whenever I want. But the other choices are really just as good. The way character progression works here isn't like in Diablo or World of Warcraft, where you pick skills off of a class tree. Instead what happens here is more like you get to make your own skill tree, which is kinda cool. Every level you get 1 skill point, which you use to unlock slots in the skill page. And you'll notice that there are lines linking the slots together, and they also cost 1 skill point to activate. That's because abilities are split between active and passive, with passive skills having bonuses when linked to active skills. And so what happens here is you end up balancing how many skills you equip versus which ones you kinda spec into. Skills themselves, on the other hand, are only acquired through combat, at least as far as I've seen. The different enemies you fight will drop the skills that they use. For example, the enemies that throw fireballs at you will drop the fireball skill. At the same time, creatures will drop glyphs, which are your passives, like for wolf, bear, and turtle. I've linked them together to tune them up a bit, which makes my character really tough in combat. This probably isn't anywhere close to optimal, and a lot of the fun seems to revolve around figuring out which abilities work best together. In terms of combat, you only really get 4 active skills to use, but that's really all you need. For example, I've only got these 2, but they're more than enough to deal with anything and everything that I've come across so far. On top of the abilities, we get the melee weapon and ranged weapon. The ones on mine are both tuned for the caster type, but they aren't just stat sticks though, they're pretty good at dealing damage. It's pretty nice being able to soften up enemies with melee. There's also a dodge roll, which I use once in a while, especially when something's right up in your face. I'm personally not a fan of taking any amount of damage. And although combat isn't complex by any means, I find it pretty satisfying to kite a bunch of mobs and pick them apart bit by bit. Staying in prime combat shape is where the survival mechanics kick in. If we're cold and wet, it's going to take us longer to recover health and mana, and our armor gets reduced. On the flip side, if we're warm, we'll recover health and mana faster, and we'll get extra bonuses if we're well fed and rested. Up in the top right are the different status effects. Being rested means we move faster while out of combat, our mana regens if we're hydrated, and eating gives us various bonuses, like more health and mana. And what you eat matters, because that's how you determine what buffs you get. For example, we can roast a mushroom to get a 20 mana buff, but if we add it to soup with a bunch of other ingredients with their own buffs, then we get the 20 mana buff plus, 20 health buff, and so on. It also stacks a bit, so you can tailor your food to whatever bonus you want most. I've also found rum out in the world which gives elemental resistances, and it kind of makes me think that distilling ought to be in the game. It would be really cool to be able to brew different alcohols for a drink-based buff. Or maybe even be able to make coffees and teas so that you can get a warmth buff, which would be really helpful at night. It'd be especially handy for full moon raids, which, quick note, it's not in the current build because it's being reworked. But it's going to be back soon, don't worry. Now these raids occur every few days, just like in 7 Days to Die. You basically get swarmed on all sides during the full moon in multiple waves. The previous version was pretty tough. I almost died a lot of times because I just wasn't ready for it, and I ended up fighting out in the rain at midnight. I also ran out of buffs during the middle of it, and it took a really long time to kill everything because my regen was basically 0. I honestly can't wait to see the reworked version because I want to see, how much it's been changed, and if building a horde base is worth it. I'm not really sure because AoE will actually damage your buildings. We'll have to see. But you still do need a defensive perimeter for your main base. I'm having to build one right now. It's a really simple one with these spikes. Nothing fancy. We can also put walls on a gate, but I don't think that's necessary at this point. The main reason is that you'll get attacked every morning, though it's pretty mild at first. Eventually you'll get stuff like these annoying fast ghosts that explode in an AoE, and it wrecks a bunch of your stuff all at once. Yeah, they suck pretty hard. Building itself is pretty easy. See these different categories at the very bottom with the subcategories right above. I really appreciate this pretty simple UI because it implies a foundational approach to building. Anyway, all we really do is select and place wherever we want. The game's got this point-based snapping system between tiles, which I also really appreciate. It seems easy enough to snap tiles together as long as you have the right angle, although rotating can take a bit, but it's otherwise pretty easy to snap tiles to each other. Now, my absolute favorite thing in the game is the stash. I am seriously tired of having a ton of different chests on shelves everywhere. Like maybe they're labeled or whatever. It's not an elegant solution, and I know a lot of survival games do this. But this game does something different, and it tries modular storage. So we have this one chest, and it's supplemented by 2 tables and 3 crates. Each of these basically augment the chests. The tables increase stack sizes, and the crates increase the amount of slots. So you can mix and match them however you like, up to a maximum of 5. And I find it so much easier to keep things organized this way. There's also craft from storage right from the get-go, which I believe should be the standard for all survival crafting. Another interesting thing is how tools work. Traditionally, we'd have to slot them to our tool belt and switch around as we need to, but we don't have to do that here. It's just fine sitting in your inventory until needed. Like if we go up to a node like a tree or a rock, we just get a prompt to chop the tree down or to mine the rock. The tools do have durability and take damage, but instead of making a new one or repairing them, we just sharpen them back to 100%. I really like this simplification except for one thing. It loses the aspect of having a tool belt, which is important to the genre. I suggest that instead of piling these up randomly in the inventory, they should probably have their own dedicated tool slots on the character sheet. So what's the verdict here? Is this game old and busted, or is it the new hotness?
Old and busted, new hotness.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely a bit of both. We've got that style that calls back to classic Blizzard, and it's coupled with some much needed improvement on survival crafting mechanics. Plus it's all made by a single developer, which never fails to impress me, which makes me look forward to seeing how the game develops. It seems to be going in the right direction so far. You know, plans for the future includes multiplayer, dungeons, an updated raid night. I've left a link to Beyond the Map down in the description. You should check it out, especially if you want to help support indie devs. I think they deserve your cash way more than the big game studios do. Anyway, hope you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.